We're going to be talking to you today about our digital transformation journey at Southland. We really wanted to talk a little bit about what digital transformation means for us, how we see this. And before we get into it, I just wanted to introduce myself. Josh Getz, I'm Senior Director of AEC Technologies at Southland, joined by Julio, who's the Associate Director of Construction Technology at Southland. And we're going to be going through a couple things with you today. We're going to be going through who we are as a company. So for anybody that's not familiar with us, we're going to go through just a brief overview of who we are as a company, how we see digital transformation, and sort of the lens that we view that through. We're going to talk about some of our specific innovation efforts and go through some of the challenges that we've had and some of the successes that we've had to sort of highlight the path that we've been on as a company. We'll talk a little bit about the COVID-19 pandemic and the challenges that we faced through that, and some of the successes that we've had. And then we'll spend a little time talking about where we're going in the future, and hopefully leave enough time here for some Q&A at the end so that we can have some chat and interaction. So we'll start with who we are as a company, the story of our company. And Southland has been in business. We've been in business for over 70 years. We are an MEP building systems expert, and we really have services across the project lifecycle. We've been adding to our services and the trades that we provide over the last 70 years up to today, where we really have a full service MEPF building systems firm, pipe fitting, sheet metal, plumbing, sprinkler, electrical design. And like I said, our approach is to go across the entire project life cycle. And with that, we have several businesses and we focus on several markets. So everything from healthcare, mission critical, sports and entertainment. We've really expanded over the last several decades in terms of the markets that we serve. And the businesses that we have as a company really span that project life cycle. So we have an engineering group within the company, several hundred engineers focusing on everything conceptual design through fabrication, modeling. We have a construction division focused on everything from fabrication, prefabrication, and installation out in the field. And we have a business in Advise that focuses on building automation systems, service and maintenance and operations of facilities. And just recently, we started an energy business that focuses on energy services and solutions and consulting. So we really have a full life cycle connection across the project life cycle. And where we're located as a company, we have offices across the U.S., primarily on the East and West Coast. This is why I spent so much time away from my kids. And then we have projects, though, that are out of those markets and regions that really are across the country. So we primarily focus our offices, like I said, on East and West Coast, but we do a lot of out-of-market work as well. And just by the numbers, and we're showing this to you just to give you a sense of the company in terms of scale. We have about 3,200 employees across 5 divisions that cover the region that I just mentioned, and we're right at about just over $1 billion in revenue as of last year. And one of the reasons that I think this is important, and some of the things that we're going to be talking about, this is just for showing where we are as a company. I think, a lot of the challenges that you're going to hear and a lot of the strategies that we've put in place are related to, how we're structured and the fact that we have multiple divisions and a lot of employees. But I really think that a lot of the things that we're going to be covering, the concepts that we're going to be talking about, work at really all scales, both smaller and larger. So as we get into this, I want to start with how we see digital transformation. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And at Southland, we really don't see digital transformation through the lens of technical or technology. We really see it as creating a culture of innovation, a culture that really accepts and thrives in change, that can accept change, that actually looks forward to it at some level. And that's hard to do. And I think, we see this as part of a broader innovation strategy, just not as a digital transformation strategy alone. And I really, when you think about what is innovation, then, I think it's easy to get caught up in the idea that innovation is just invention or just ideas. But I think, in our perspective, a lot of this has to do with taking ideas and making them real. And I think we get caught up in technology platforms and software platforms. And a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is really the process of how do you take these things and use them. It's not about ideas alone. This is about how we take ideas and turn them into reality. And I think for a lot of us in the room that go to these types of conferences, it's not so much how do we create the next best technology. This is something that a lot of the software and technology providers do, and they need our help in doing that. But for us, a lot of the challenge is really how do we take those tools, those technologies, and implement them at scale in our company, and to really have an enterprise impact across the board. And this is the challenge that we want to talk about. To us, innovation is really the hard work of going through that process. So how do we look at this then? How do we look at our progression through it? We have this maturity model that we've put together, and I'm sure you've seen versions of this. We have a version of this that has been born out of our own challenges and heartaches over the years in terms of the failures that we've had and the successes that we've had. And we really see this as a journey that really goes from this heroic stage where we're looking at the expert kind of that can do it on their own. We call it, sitting at a single desk, right? Coming up with something really brilliant, but maybe it's confined to that one person, siloed, fast, but really alone. You're responding to opportunities, you're avoiding crises. This is what happens, I think, a lot of times at the project level, because we're a project-based industry. So one project has a great idea, implements something, and then poof, it's very hard to get that to scale to every other project. And that's where we really see the benefit as companies, as organizations. So managed, this is where we're connected, but we might be moving a little bit slower, standardizing our processes, going across departments, across functional groups, starting to build digital capacity, and looking at automation as maybe one of the primary focus areas. Unified for us at Southland, this is a huge step for us because we have multiple offices, multiple regions. How do we go far together? How do we get that whole organization to move in a direction with new changes that are coming at us at increasing rates and make it enterprise and scalable? This is where we have processes to govern and prioritize what we tackle as a business. And this is where we start to become adaptive to change. We become better at it, and we look at process improvement. Strategic, this is really where the culture starts changing, where innovation is really part of the growth strategy, where we have multi-year look aheads and planning in terms of what we're going to be chasing and how we're going to be focusing on that over a longer time horizon. So this is really the way that we see the progression through this innovation maturity. But there's some important drivers. How do you move from one stage to the next? How do you move through this in an effective way? And that's really what we're going to get into here. So this is what we really think of as the drivers of innovation. And it's interesting listening to Simon talk a little bit about the relationships and the connections that we need. I think that resonates with me because we put relationships first for a reason, and we've seen this inside of our company. Having the right relationships, the right connections, nurturing those, building those relationships is absolutely critical for success at an enterprise level. And we've really found that to be the foundation. We've put a lot of effort into every one of these, but relationships is really, I go back to that as being the most important thing, especially when dealing with change. Strategy, you need to have a roadmap. And we're using the analogy here behind the scenes of a car, of a race. And you'll see that theme come up in this, in this deck a couple times. But, you know, if relationships are how we work together, strategy, you need to have a plan. You need to have a plan of attack in terms of how you're going to approach the course. We need an innovation culture, again, one that accepts change, that begins to get better at change progressively over time. And finally, we really need to have an approach to execution, putting new innovation ideas in place, executing that repeatably and consistently. And, you know, any one of these can be missing, and it really makes it challenging. It's already a challenging thing, even if you do all of these things well. But execution, if that's not there, it starts to erode the trust and the relationships. You can't execute your strategy. So having those repeatable processes and those tools and procedures for implementation, we found to be absolutely critical to being successful in this. So we're going to go through each one of these, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've done as a company to approach these things from a framework perspective, from putting processes in place that make sure that we're doing these things and doing them well. And so we'll start with relationships. So we have a company strategic goal of being one company, operating as one company across the business. And we really see building this trust as a foundation for that, of having strategic partnerships at multiple levels of the organization that are all functioning and helping us with implementing new change, implementing new innovation, new technologies, new processes. So over the years, we've put this plan in place starting a couple of years ago. And phase one was really about solidifying our services and how we respond to requests from across the business for various things. And that was really our launch. We've engaged in what we call business relationship management. And this is our model for basically making sure that we're building the right relationships and maintaining them across the business. Phase two, a couple of years ago, we started with getting into this, where we're really further developing those relationships and becoming what we call advisors across different areas of the business. And finally, you know, our end goal is really to end up at the point where we're strategic partners. And that's really what's helping relationships get all the way from that heroic effort where we're relying on one person to, you know, across a department, a division, a company. And this is absolutely critical. So as we go through this, you're going to see these slides talk about these types of frameworks. Relationships are really important, but what do we do with them? The first thing that we attack here is really the strategy. And we've labeled this building a foundation. This is the approach that we've been on for the last several years, is really laying a solid foundation for how do we take innovation ideas and make them into reality? What's our approach to that? Because there's no shortage of good ideas. We need a way to focus our company's efforts and focus everybody's efforts to do the things that are really going to have the impact. And it really starts with strategic objectives. You know, what our strategic objectives as a company are, and tying that out and really driving bottom-up innovation ideas to meet those strategic objectives. And a lot of what this slide is about is how we manage that tension between how do you maintain a company direction and strategy with regard to some of these innovation efforts, but not lose the idea of the grassroots, bottom up. You know, all the good ideas are coming from the projects and the people working on them day to day. How do we have those two things meet and have a focused plan that makes sense and puts us in the right direction? And that's really where we've put in place a process within the company called, we call it our business process improvement planning. And we have a group of leaders, cross-functional leaders from across the company that are charged with getting together and collecting those ideas from different areas of the business every year. And I think every year we get close to 100 of these things that come in and that we're reviewing. and aligning to the strategy. And these leaders, this cross-functional group really helps to put focus areas together that sort of align those ideas to the strategy, to the strategic objectives, and make sure that we have a plan that's a multi-year plan that's focused on the areas that we need to focus on. Finally, the projects, and really getting back to that execution concept, we need to deliver those improvements effectively on time and within budget, and it needs to be repeatable and scalable. And this is a key thing. One of the, I think it's easy to think about these processes as something that's just, oh, you're going to put a process map together. We really see it mostly from the perspective of the people that are taking part in these projects. We have a lot of these projects that are running at any one time. Julio's going to talk about some of them. We want people to have a consistent experience from one to the next. There's enough change that's already going on in the business that we don't want their change to be experienced through our methods of implementing these things. So being consistent is really important to that. Culture. This is, again, coming back to the relationships, but this is more how we're building effective players and maintaining a sense of fun. This is critical to us, especially as we've gone through this COVID pandemic. Some of this stuff may seem a little dry. You're talking about processes and implementation methods, but keeping a sense of fun as we're doing the hard work is absolutely critical, and really developing people and solidifying these concepts and these ideas about how we operate is really, really important. And it's gone very far to us figuring out how do you attack the challenge of cultural fit, making sure that you have people that are operating in this way, that want to operate in this way, that they're the type of people that we all want to work with. So this is how we drive the coaching and the employee development and the continued development of people. And it's all along these lines, executing through our relationships, our experience, and being aligned. And then if you're familiar with any Patrick Lencioni's books, we really took to the idea of humble, hungry, and smart in terms of how we collaborate with each other. And we drive these things into how we hire and how we train people on the team. As we get into the execution side, this is just a look at one part of what we call our project management office. So this is, again, this was created out of a lot of challenges that we've had where, before we had some of these processes in place, it was really a best effort by every team to kind of figure out the best way to do this. We've solidified a consistent approach across the board that lets us do this repeatably. And really looking at breaking down our projects across these different areas. All of our innovation projects that we do and that we implement in the company go through this process. And although initially for some people it seems a little bit overbearing, you have to follow these processes and procedures, what we find over time is that it really does increase consistency, and it increases engagement by the project teams that are taking part in these change efforts. So I wanted to go through this. We wanted to tell you how we see innovation, how we look at digital transformation, but then also some of the things that we've put in place as a business to sort of codify our approach to these things and have a consistent approach to these things across the organization. So I'm going to turn it over to Julio, and Julio is going to get into some of the specific efforts that we've gone through and really highlight some more details of what this looks like.
So thanks, Josh. So as Josh mentioned, we've gone through a lot of efforts to put frameworks in place, but like Josh said, it can be a little dry or seem a little dry just talking about frameworks. And we're just going to cover a little bit about the efforts that we actually went through, the pain points. There was a lot of pain points. There was a lot of challenges, and we want to give you guys a little bit of background on what those were and how we overcame them. So we're going to cover some of the building the foundation part of it that Josh was mentioning, what we did to do that. And Our team was created in 2013, so the AEC Technologies team. And inside the AEC Technologies team, we have design, fabrication, and construction. And just being honest with everyone here, between 2013 to 2015, it was really hard. And now obviously we've had a lot of hard times since then too, but 2013 and 2015 were extremely hard. It was a little chaotic. We were a new team getting pulled in multiple directions. The company didn't have a vision yet for what the strategy was going to be moving forward. So all of that was trying to, it was being put together. So what we did is we shifted our focus, and as a company, we decided to create a unified workflow. So what that looks like, essentially, you see this picture here. This unified workflow translated later into being the Southland workflow. And what that is we brought 5 divisions or representatives from 5 divisions, and working together along with our corporate team, we put something together on paper. And prior to this, it was very difficult to discuss enterprise level solutions because we didn't have something to point to and say, this is the area that we want to focus on, or this is the area that we want to improve. So the process that we went through, we mapped all the critical activities and the project lifecycle, right? And that ranged all the way from functional groups like business development, sales, estimating, engineering, detailing, fabrication, installation, commissioning, and operations. So we had multiple rounds of meetings in person and virtual, and at the end of the day, we finally had our first version, and that's what this meeting was. And we actually ended up signing the paper, the diagram, because it was a great achievement of bringing these many different perspectives and divisions into one room and coming up with one single workflow. So this later translated into the company identifying opportunities. And these opportunities were related to, Josh mentioned focus areas, so collaborating and sharing resources. As a national company, we found it over time that it was very important to be able to share resources and share work. And that was one of the main focuses. The other things were stuff like being able to onboard employees a little bit easier with getting them started right the first, from day one. Creating standards, BIM standards, and those sorts of things. And then I would say one thing that was very important, and obviously we hear about this from, ever since we started hearing about BIM, right? Sharing information downstream, and being a design builder, that was very important to us because we can leverage that information from engineering all the way down to installation and the handover process. So once we identified those opportunities as a business, what we did is the business created the first BIM VDC strategy. And as you can see there, the BIM model is in the center, and obviously the accuracy of the parts is very important, but we cared about the information pretty heavily. So we wanted that to be incorporated all the way from project planning all the way to handover. And our main focus was really to create consistency in every single project. That hasn't been easy, and we failed. Being honest, we failed in certain projects, but that's what we're striving to do. And being able to have multiple teams be able to collaborate, not just within that same office, but the same region across the country, and also improving our accuracy. So when this information finally makes it downstream, it's something that our field personnel can use and trust. And obviously, that trust is not just for internal parties, but it's also for our clients and owners, right? Is developing that trust with them as well. So just to give you a little bit of insight into with the Southland workflow, what was the outcome of it? So one of the things that we wanted to highlight here is a lot of material that was created because of the Southland workflow. So 313 process training pages, 603 technology training pages, over 1,300 are training courses. And that took over 5 years, and that's where we are right now with it. And we're still building more content and more material. But all of this was really to drive the point of we're focusing on the process and the people. The technology is there to support it. So now we're gonna cover some of the first efforts that we did, obviously we all know what BIM is, right? And we've been talking about it for ages now. At least that's what it feels like. But as a company, we put a lot of focus on being able to have a fabricatable design. Again, we're a design builder, so we can leverage the expertise of our detailers. We call them constructability folks here, right? But our detailers, and being able to incorporate that into the design and modular construction, prefabrication. We're very big on prefabrication and creating BIM standards and centralizing training and creating tools to fill gaps. So just to give you guys a little bit of background information, our very first engineering project inside of Revit, right, was in 2007. And again, we're an MEP firm. And the first project was 1.2 million square feet. So as you can imagine, there was a lot of pain, a lot of panic, a lot of late nights, not sleeping, right? And that just continued for us. The second Revit project that we did was in 2009, so 2 years later, and that was 1 million square feet. And it also had 1 million square feet of interstitial space. So very large projects, same thing, a lot of challenges. And we had, after it was 2011 when we started having really a lot of more Revit projects internally because we made it a focus. But in 2011, we had another one that was 1.8 million square feet. So very large projects for engineering. I would say we survived, and it was very challenging. But then fabrication started making it to the Revit scene, right? And in 2016, which was, I would say, was very early for where Revit was, Revit MEP. We used Revit for a almost 4 million square feet project, right? So if you can imagine trying to deal with the fabrication database and then making sure that all the services are working inside of Revit, and then not having all the tools because there were some gaps there, right? To be able to get the work done. It was very challenging, but all the people that obviously worked on those projects were very passionate about what they were doing, and they made it through, right? We all made it through. So it's just very challenging, right? Now, as far as the challenges, I think a lot of times, something that maybe I'll mention now is that I'm very passionate about car racing. Some of the images that Josh had are actually from a racetrack that is 5 minutes away from me, Summit Point. And I used to race cars and stuff like that. So I'm very passionate about it. But as you can see here, right, there's like us getting in the meeting and saying this, how we're all going to do this. And it's just like perfect in our minds and in the whiteboards and all those things, right? And everybody's shaking their head, yes, it's going to be perfect. We know what to do. And everybody walks out of that room. And then what happens, right? Like Josh mentioned execution, right? And execution is really where you start to develop trust. And as you can see here, this car, sometimes it was us driving the car, sometimes it was our business partners that were driving the car, but the car would come in hot, and you know, this what would have happened, right? You see the jack in the air, people getting hit, one guy still off the ground. And that's kind of how it felt like a lot of the times. It was challenging. And economies of scale, I mean, we went from managing these very large projects, and that's when Josh and myself were still part of the Mid-Atlantic division. We weren't part of the corporate team yet. So it was hard to scale to you know, nationwide. So there were some of the challenges. Not having all the tools for MEP, it was very challenging. And then finding subject matter experts that obviously knew the trade on the union side, but also knew Revit. That was very hard to come by. It was pretty much impossible. So, but what came out of it is that even though all these very large projects, you know, we dove right in, we gained a lot of experience as a company. And there was a lot of frustration, a lot of failures, all those things, but we failed forward, right? And what that means is that we just continue to push forward and be committed to what we started. And we feel like we made it out, right, alive. So just to give you guys a little bit of scale, what we've done here as a company is we've done over 450 Revit projects. Over 100 million square feet of building space has gone through Revit. Over $5.5 billion in revenue has gone through Revit. And then 193 plus Revit custom tools have been created. Some are small, picks and clicks, and some are robust tools. We have a SI Tools, for example. It's a custom utility that has hanger automation and also spooling tools as well. So now I'll move on to the next effort. Prefabrication. Again, we're very big on prefabrication. One thing that I wanted to highlight is on the upper right-hand corner. You see there is modular racks. One thing to note is obviously these are multi-trade racks, but you actually see the structural steel there as well. Some of the largest racks that we've done are 56 feet long, 11 feet wide, and 5 feet high, and these can be stacked, so two-tier modular racks. And obviously, to be able to do something like this, we needed, as a company, we realized that we needed to have better management of our enterprise or our fabrication database in general. So what we wanted to do as a company is have one database that was enterprise level, centralized administration of it. And you guys can read the rest of the bullets there. But we started out with 70 databases, more than 70 databases across the company. At least those are the 70 that we know of. And then that was then reduced to 6 databases, and then we reduced it to one database. So now we have one single database for the entire company. And the way that we did that, we actually used the lean methodology here, where we put the database and all its components and the environment through this process to be able to create an enterprise level database and governance to go along with it. And what we did is we put everything like service names, service abbreviations, service templates, specs, part names, part IDs, the actual parts, geometry, we put it through there because we wanted to make sure that the cut sheets actually, or at least the parts match the cut sheets. So we went through this entire process, and we had some hardships, but we made it through again. Now, some of the challenges that we had, as you can see, this makeshift race car here. A lot of our detailers, obviously, they needed to get the work done. And this, I'm just joking here by showing this this image here. It wasn't that bad, right? But they had their own databases, and they needed to get the work done, right? And then when we started centralizing the database into one single database, this is kind of like the implementation part of it. Some of them still had their souped up, race car, and then they were getting caught, right, using their database. And obviously they needed to do what they needed to do to get the work done. So, but that's, that young kid, you can see that big old smile, right? I wish I was him right now because I like racing, but that's him getting caught, right? Racing his car. But so those are some of the challenges that we faced, right? Is that we were merging everything into one database, and they were essentially trying to have people start using that one single database, and that took a lot of effort. Now, one thing to highlight here is that we actually created a fabrication team, a new fabrication team. And this team is actually comprised of folks from the union, from the trade. They're phenomenal. They know their stuff, and that was a new group that was brought in to administer this database, but not just the database, but also to provide shop support for machinery, for all the machinery that connects to the database or the network. They go out and they help the different divisions, the different offices. So just again, just to provide some numbers here, what this fabrication database is supporting. It's supporting 530,000 square feet of shop space for the 5 divisions for 300 users, and it has 50,000 ITM parts. And those 50,000 number includes sizes that we removed out. We're probably in the range of 5,500 ITM parts. But again, this was a great effort, and something to highlight here is going back to the maturity model that Josh was mentioning. A lot of it, we went from siloed and unmanaged to managed, being unified, and now thinking more strategically for all this stuff. So the third effort here is BIM from anywhere. So we've all known this. We hear it all the time. The field folks want to have the BIM information out in the field. And the bullets that you see there are the stuff that our business wanted to have access to or have the capabilities out in the field. On the upper right-hand corner, you see an image of a dashboard, and that was the first dashboard that we used to start tracking the implementation of BIM out in the field. And we're tracking things from like what capabilities we're using, what modules, what divisions were using what type of training they were receiving, whether it's virtual or in person. That was important because we wanted to see if virtual was as effective as in person. And I would say it's been pretty even. So one thing to mention here, again, going back to the racing theme, right, is some folks, were using email and Excel and all those things to track issues and share images of the models and all those things. And obviously they were trying to do what they could with what they had. But that brought on challenges, right? And then we came in as a company and said we want to start using some of these cloud platforms. So for some of them, it might have looked like you're moving from a lawnmower race car, right, to something like this, a high-end race car. So it might have felt overwhelming, but there was a lot of struggles there as far as adoption. But what came out of it is that we ended up creating a train-the-trainer framework, which means that now we're set up and we have a group, construction technologies group, that's set up so that we can go and train the different offices, different divisions, the project teams, and train trainers, right? And those trainers then will essentially train the rest of their groups. And that has worked out very well. We've created custom utilities. There's one that we call the Smart Checklist. What that is it automates the process of creating commissioning checklists and populating them with data, equipment data and design data. And anyone that has done that in the past or knows about commissioning, you know how tedious that could be, copying and pasting information from Excel spreadsheet to checklist. And that has gone over very well, right? And our vendors, actually our clients have requested that our smart checklist is used on their projects. So that's been very successful for us. Now, another thing that I wanted to cover here was just some of the numbers associated with this effort. So 300 plus projects we've done and been in the field, and then 16 trainers, official trainers, and obviously they train other people, but we don't keep track of all those trainers. And then 2.5 thousand users that have been using our system and in the cloud, and then 75,000 smart checklists that have been processed through this custom tool that we built, the smart checklist. So now on the next one here, again, with the theme of BIM from anywhere, we implemented virtual desktop infrastructure, or VDI. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, this is the equivalent of having a virtual machines and a cloud hosted environment like Azure, and then you just accessing that VM and using that horsepower there. And that really allows you to use those VDI machines from anywhere, right? And really from any device. So these are some of the items on the list there that the company wanted to get out of this technology. Working from anywhere has obviously become very important, especially during these times. But let's just move on here to kind of like what that is does the same thing as, you being at home. You can't go to the race and race your car, but you're watching it on TV, right? What VDI allows you to do is to have a setup like this, right? And obviously I'm very jealous of whoever does have this setup at home, but it's kind of the equivalent, right? Detailers and engineers, estimators, and our CFD groups can essentially do their work from anywhere, right? Which has been very beneficial. And this took multiple teams across the company to actually put this in place. And this has been happening for the last 2 years. We just completed the last implementation earlier this year. So it's just some of the things here is these are the main goals that we had as a company for it, is making sure it was scalable, right? That it was resilient, where you didn't need to use VPN or rely on some kind of like network latency to be able to do your work remotely. Accessibility, it needed to be easy for the design groups, detailers, everyone to be able to use this technology, and it needed to be secure. So just here, some of the numbers again, we ended up moving 178 terabytes of data was centralized. What this means is that it was data that was in project site servers, right? Office servers, and all of this data was essentially centralized during this implementation. There was over 400 VDI machines that were created for users, and we ended up decommissioning 150 plus servers in the process, and this was for 5 divisions. So one other thing that we wanted to cover, which is the pandemic and how this played out for us. So I'll go to the next slide here, and this shows an image of a convention center that we did, and essentially what we needed to do here is it was 437,000 square feet and over 450 patient beds that needed to be done for the specific project. Now, everything that we had done, all the implementations, so those four major efforts, those essentially helped us be prepared for this unforeseen challenge. And that's where we think that our digital transformation wasn't an accident. It was just a year or so of planning and heartaches and challenges and failures and successes that got us to this point. One thing that I wanted to mention, we've been focusing on these 4 major efforts, which is the fabrication database, BIM for the office, field, and BIM from anywhere. But we've just this year, for example, we've done over 90 innovation projects. Over 50 of those have been completed, and so the rest of them are either still going now or they've been canceled, put on hold. So we've done hundreds of innovation projects since 2013, since our group was created. But we wanted to focus on these 4 because it kind of contextually it fit right with just innovation efforts and also with what happened now with the pandemic. And our goal here was really to provide the right information to the people that needed it. And as I mentioned, I've been into a lot of car accidents related to rain. So I'm actually a little scared of rain now. Silly, even when I'm driving my wife's minivan. But in a more serious note, something to highlight here is that sometimes we can see the challenges, right? And sometimes we can't. And what really gets us through these challenges is having the right people, the right relationships, the right culture, the right framework and foundation to weather the storms. And everything that we covered, these 4 major efforts, all the frameworks that Josh talked about played into every single one of those. They were extremely critical. We needed to roll up our sleeves, get grease in our hands, right? Build relationships and all those things. Push through it, have the commitment to do it, and then all the way through execution and the strategy and all those things. So now that we covered some of these efforts and that built our foundation, I'll pass the time over to Josh so that he can cover what's next for us. All right, what does the future look like?
We'll talk about where we're headed as a company. And what we're doing to build out on that foundation. If we go back to the beginning and we look at our maturity model, like we talked about in the beginning, we really started off this journey as being much more on the heroic side, waiting for people to take it on themselves to try to push these changes through. It's very, very hard to do at scale. You need to have the relationships, the connections to really make that happen. And we mapped this out across our progression as a company. And, over the last, I would say 3 to 4 years, we've really made a lot of strides going from siloed to managed and putting in place a lot of the frameworks that we talked about and that you saw in play on some of these innovation efforts were really the drivers for some of those successes. And the specific projects that we've done and executed well, those led to continued trust, building credibility with the people that we work with across the company. And you can see we're mapping this on. So in the future, where are we focused from now forward? We're really focused on the cultural side of this. We feel like we've put some of the process and the framework in place, and we're really zoning in on the cultural side. And from a specific area of focus on the technology and innovation side, we're really diving into industrialized construction, specifically looking at systems that we're going to be using for tracking our material information, our spooling information, our work package information from design through our fabrication, modeling and detailing efforts into the shop, out through the field, and into install. And so that's a big focus for us. The other thing that we're also looking at is team collaboration technologies and some of the things that are available to us. I think we're all in the boat where we've probably been using traditional file servers, traditional ways of sharing documents. We're looking at how we can leverage some of the newer platforms at a construction project level and really taking advantage of some of those things. So ultimately, we see ourselves, we're not there yet. We're still learning. We're still failing and trying to do so in a way that we learn from our mistakes and building on it. But this is where we're headed in the future. And we think we're headed in that strategic direction. Why we do this, why it matters to us, it goes back to the people, the connections, the relationships. We're not trying to make our jobs easier, implementing technology and innovation, across the business, but we're trying to make everybody that works in the company in these areas, we're trying to make their lives better and easier. And we're trying to deliver better quality to the customers in the process. We want to have an innovative culture, a fun place to work, something that's exciting and that inspires people. So this is what we're trying to do. And I think, we thought a little bit about what we want to leave the group with. And I think it's a little bit of, taking a step back and thinking about innovation, not just at a company level, but at an industry level. And back to the idea that, how do we move the industry forward? A lot of this is about how we implement new things at scale within our businesses. If we're all better at doing that, the industry moves much, much quicker and much further. So we will move into Q&A questions.
Yes. Look, I really love this kind of recurring theme. We probably only have time for just one question. I'm going to ask it myself, but there's a recurring theme from both Josh and Julio about the power of relationships. I'm curious, like obviously within Australia right now, the ability to create relationships the way we have in the past, the physical events has largely been taken away from us. There's a lot less flying, a lot less traveling around the country. I imagine it's the same in the US as well. So what are you doing now? And like, how has that changed for Southland in terms of that relationship building, which seems to be so core to both your culture, but also in terms of moving projects like this forward? Maybe, Dylan, we could just get Julio and Josh back up to have a quick feedback on that before we kind of go to the morning tea break.
I'll take a stab at it really quick. There's a couple of areas that we focused on. One is the team development within the teams that we're working with directly. And we've done a lot of things like, it could be virtual happy hours, team development sessions, but it takes it takes effort to put those things in place and really push them through. You have to set them up and organize them. We've had a lot of sessions with our teams where, we have people sharing things that are completely non-work related. Share something with the team about a hobby that you have or whatever it may be, or just a session where we get on a call to chat, at the end of the day. I think things like that go a long way. I think everybody's dealing with the virtual aspect of everything now, and that's definitely a challenge. I think that's where the rigorous execution part of it comes in being consistent in setting up meetings and following up with people, calling people on the phone. Don't just rely on chatting. A lot gets lost in chat, just like it does in email, even though, GIFs are fun. But calling people is always better. So I think it takes a little bit of effort there to make it work.
Yeah, I think there's some really good insights there. I think, trying to make time for video conferencing without necessarily having an agenda, where there is just space and time to talk about whatever comes up, I think that's hugely important. And again, I 100% agree that kind of the richness of video communication versus, say, chat or email is really powerful as well. So this is beautiful. Like, it actually gives us a lovely segue into the next break. So thank you so much, John. Thank you so much, Julio, for taking the time to share with us. We are going into our first morning tea break. And as part of that, we are opening the networking cafe. Now, when we ask people, I've been involved in the virtual event space pretty much, over the last 6 months, but has been speaking at conferences for probably 5 or 6 years. And when you ask people why they go to conferences, the number one thing is, I'm there for the networking. Now, people would pay thousands and thousands of dollars for that, but we're going to give it to you for free. We're going to do a virtual networking event in the virtual cafe. So I don't know if Josh and Julio might even join us there. You'll see a little link at the top of your screen that says the virtual cafe. If you click on a button there that says join in or enter the cafe, you'll be asked to just put in your name, your email address, so they can kind of, identify who you are. You're going to be assigned to a virtual table. And at that virtual table, you got to sit around and have chats with actually very real people. Also, while you're in there, if you want to do a little search and find other people that you'd like to catch up with and build relationships with, there's a search function and you can move and meet them on a table. You can shift yourself around tables. I really encourage you to give it a go and see what the experience is like. As I mentioned in my keynote earlier, a big opportunity today is not just in the incredible content that people like Josh and Julio are sharing, but what in this experience, in this virtual experience, and how do we do things like build relationships, with these kind of emerging tools that are now available to us.